I know people like to exaggerate when they say, my life changed in one day, but for me, it was literally one Sunday morning. One stupid family brunch that flipped everything upside down and made me realize just how little I mattered to the people who were supposed to love me the most. It wasn't even a fancy brunch, just my mom's half-burned quiche, a fruit salad my dad swore he cut up himself. Spoiler, it was straight out of a plastic container, and my sister Megan holding court at the head of the table like she was the damn Queen of England. Megan has always been Megan, the golden child, the one my parents worshipped like she was some kind of goddess sent to Earth to bless us mere mortals. Me? I was just the other one. If Megan was sunshine, I was the shadow she cast. But that day, oh that day, she had this smug little smile plastered on her face, like she was holding a secret she couldn't wait to drop. We were mid-bite when she set her fork down, dabbed her mouth like she was on a talk show, and said, well, I guess this is as good a time as any to share the news. Mom and Dad updated their will, and I'm the sole heir. The room froze. I swear I could hear the old clock ticking on the wall. The sound of my fork hitting the plate was louder than it should have been. I blinked at her, waiting for the punchline, but then I looked at Mom. Tight smile. Dad? Wouldn't even meet my eyes, and just like that my stomach dropped. This wasn't a joke. They really cut me out. Wait, what? My voice cracked, but I didn't care. Mom reached for my hand like I was a toddler who just fell off the swing. Honey, it's not what you think, we just felt this was best. Megan has more responsibilities. The house, the assets, everything will be safer in her hands. Safer in her hands. I almost laughed. Megan couldn't keep a plant alive, but apparently she was the chosen one to manage an entire estate. Megan leaned back, sipping her mimosa, eyes sparkling. She didn't need to smirk. The whole moment was her smirk. I pushed my chair back so hard it screeched across the floor. So that's it? I don't matter? I'm just what? The spare? Dad finally spoke, voice sharp. Don't be dramatic. You've always been independent. You'll be fine. Independent. Their favorite excuse for neglect. And here's the thing. This wasn't new. It wasn't like they suddenly picked Megan over me out of nowhere. No, this was the cherry on top of a lifetime of favoritism. When I was 13, I won the regional science fair, first place. I built this insane working model of a wind turbine system. Guess who skipped the award ceremony because Megan had a cheerleading showcase? Yep, my parents. My 16th birthday, I got a second-hand watch. Megan's 16th, she got a brand new car with a bow on top. College graduation, they almost didn't come because Megan had a work thing. So sitting at that brunch table, hearing them confirm it, hearing them say out loud that I didn't count, it wasn't a surprise, it was confirmation. It was every ignored achievement, every brushed-off cry for attention, solidified in legal paperwork. I stared at them, heat rising up my neck, chest tight. You've got to be kidding me. Mom's lips trembled. It's not personal, not personal. You're literally telling me I don't matter, that everything you own, everything you worked for, is going to her, not me, her. Megan finally chimed in, voice syrupy sweet. Come on, don't make this about you. You've always been the strong one. You don't need it the way I do. I've got 2 kids, a husband, a mortgage. Yeah, I snapped, and you've also got 2 nannies, a husband who makes 6 figures, and a lifestyle you can't even afford. Don't act like you're the victim here. Her face flushed red, but she didn't argue. She didn't have to. My parents jumped in to shield her, like always. Enough. Dad barked, we're not discussing this any further. What's done is done. I laughed, bitter, sharp. Of course, because Megan gets everything, and I'm just supposed to smile and clap for her like always. That's the script, right? The silence that followed was deafening. Here's the part that really kills me. Even in that moment, some part of me hoped they'd backpedal, that they'd see how hurt I was and say, no, you're right, this isn't fair. But they didn't. Instead, Mom whispered, we love you too, you know, and I just lost it. Really, because it's never felt like it, not once in my entire life. I saw something flicker in her eyes then, guilt maybe, but it was too little too late. Megan, she just sat there, sipping her drink, victorious, and me, I stood there shaking, tears burning in my eyes, and said the only thing that felt true in that moment, you're going to regret this. Then I walked out. But here's the thing, they did regret it, eventually. They just didn't know it yet, Because that brunch, that was the spark, the beginning of a storm none of us saw coming. I stormed out of that brunch with my hands shaking so badly I could barely grab my car keys. My heart was hammering in my chest, not just from anger, but from this heavy, suffocating sense of confirmation. It wasn't shock, not really. It was like, deep down, I'd always known this day was coming. Because here's the truth, my parents had been telling me I was second place my entire life. The brunch was just the first time they put it into legal writing. I remember driving aimlessly after leaving their house, the world outside my windshield blurring while my brain went into overdrive. Every memory, every little slight, every time I was pushed aside to make room for Megan, it all came flooding back like a highlight reel of being the forgotten child. And God, it started so early. When I turned 6, I had this birthday party I'd been begging for. Nothing big, nothing fancy, just a cake with dinosaurs on it and a couple of kids from school. That morning, I woke up so excited I could barely sit still. But when my friends arrived, do you know what happened? Megan came downstairs in her princess dress, and suddenly the whole party wasn't about my dinosaurs anymore. It was about Megan twirling in her sparkly gown, Megan demanding the first slice of cake, Megan stealing the spotlight like it was her birthright. I sat there in my plastic T-Rex hat, watching everyone clap for her, not me. And my parents? They didn't say a word. They laughed, took pictures, and let her blow out one of my candles. It sounds small, right? But when you're 6, and you've been waiting all year for a day that's supposed to be yours, and your sister steals it, and your parents let her, that sticks. Fast forward to 13, I'd spent weeks working on my science fair project. Renewable wind turbines, tiny but functional. I was so proud. I won first place. Out of everyone in the region, my project was the best. I came home holding that trophy like it was proof that I mattered. My parents barely looked up from the kitchen table. "That's nice, honey," my mom said, "but we can't make it to the ceremony tonight. Megan's got her cheerleading showcase, and you know how important that is." Important? It was cartwheels. Literal cartwheels. I remember standing in my room that night, staring at the trophy on my desk while hearing their cheers from Megan's event echoing down the hall. That was the first time I realized achievements didn't mean anything in my family, unless Megan did them. Vacations were even worse. We'd plan family trips, but somehow everything revolved around Megan. Megan wanted to go to Disney? Boom, we went to Disney. Megan wanted the beach instead of the mountains? Guess where we ended up? The beach. Megan wanted the biggest room in the hotel? You better believe she got it, while I slept on a pull-out couch. One year, I begged, literally begged for us to visit the Space Museum. I had this obsession with astronomy. My mom promised we'd squeeze it in. You know what happened? Megan got sunburned on day 2, and suddenly the rest of the trip was about Megan's comfort. The museum never happened, and the final straw, the one that still makes my blood boil, my college graduation. I worked my ass off for that degree. Late nights, part-time jobs, student loans, everything. The morning of my graduation, I put on that cap and gown and felt this rush of pride. Finally, I thought, this is my moment. They almost didn't come. Why? Because Megan had a big presentation at work. Not even a life or death thing. Just a damn PowerPoint. I'll never forget standing in that stadium, scanning the crowd, heart pounding when I finally spotted them sneaking in late, right as my name was called. They missed it. They missed my moment. But they were front and center when Megan got a promotion 6 months later, throwing her a party like she'd won the Nobel Prize. So when Megan announced at brunch that she was the sole heir, it didn't come out of nowhere. It was the logical conclusion to years of being invisible, but that didn't make it hurt any less. Because it wasn't about money. It was about validation. It was about my parents officially saying, "You never mattered as much as she did." I sat in my car that day, knuckles white on the steering wheel, tears burning my eyes, and thought, I should have seen this coming. I should have known. And yet some small part of me had always hoped they'd change. That one day, they'd finally see me. But they didn't. Instead, they chose Megan. Again. Always. That night, lying awake in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, I made myself a promise. I wasn't going to beg them to love me. I wasn't going to compete with Megan anymore. I wasn't going to play the role of the forgotten child while she got crowned queen. I was done. They could keep their will. They could keep their house, their money, their stupid heirlooms, but I wasn't going to let them erase me. One day I thought, they'll come crawling back. And when they did, they weren't going to find the same quiet, overlooked kid they thought they could step on. They'd find someone stronger, someone who didn't need them anymore. I didn't know then how fast things would unravel for Megan, how the golden child's perfect little world was already cracking. But I was about to find out. I wish I could say I ignored Megan after that brunch, that I brushed it off and lived my life. But Megan wasn't the type to let something go quietly. No, she wanted me to know she'd won. She wanted me to see it in her smile, hear it in her voice, feel it in the smug way she carried herself. 2 days after the brunch, she called me. Not my parents, Megan. She actually had the audacity to start the call with, "Hey, just checking in. No hard feelings, right?" No hard feelings. My entire existence had just been erased from the family legacy, and she thought it was something I could laugh off over the phone. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. I asked her why she was even calling. She giggled, literally giggled, and said, "Well, I just didn't want things to be awkward when I move into the house. You know, Mom and Dad already said I can start making some changes. Changes to the house I grew up in, to the walls that held my childhood, the backyard where I learned to ride my bike, the living room where we used to decorate the Christmas tree." She was already calling it hers. I hung up on her. I didn't even say goodbye. My hands were trembling so hard I nearly dropped the phone. But of course that wasn't the end of it. Megan never stopped at one jab. The next week I got a group text. Yes, a group text of photos. She'd gone over to my parents' house and started taking pictures of the furniture, the paintings, even my grandmother's china cabinet. Under each picture, she wrote captions like, "Thinking of selling this one," or "Might paint this room a brighter color." I couldn't breathe when I saw those pictures. She was dismantling my childhood piece by piece, like it was just inventory for her personal estate sale. And my parents? They said nothing. They didn't call. They didn't apologize. They didn't even ask how I was doing. It was like I'd disappeared, like I'd never been their kid at all. I started avoiding family calls altogether. If my mom rang, I let it go to voicemail. If my dad texted, it sat unread. I couldn't stomach their voices, not when I knew they were sitting in the same house with Megan, probably laughing about how dramatic I was being. But then something happened. Megan slipped, just a little, and for the first time in years, I saw a crack in her perfect little facade. I ran into her at the grocery store of all places. She was pushing a cart full of wine bottles and microwave meals. Normally, Megan wouldn't be caught dead in a grocery store. She always bragged about her personal shopper, how she didn't waste time with peasant errands. When she saw me, her face froze for a split second before she plastered on that fake smile. "Oh, fancy seeing you here," she said, like it was some sitcom coincidence. But I noticed things. I noticed the bags under her eyes, the chipped nail polish, the way she scanned her card twice because it got declined the first time. Megan wasn't as untouchable as she wanted me to think. Later that week, I heard through the grapevine, because small towns talk, that Megan's husband had moved out, something about differences and needing space. Translation, he was tired of her crap. I should have felt sorry for her. That's what a good sibling would have done. But instead, I felt something sharp and dangerous bubbling up in my chest, something I wasn't proud of, but couldn't deny. Satisfaction, because maybe for the first time, Megan was about to find out what it felt like to be on the losing side, and I wasn't about to miss the show. After that run-in at the grocery store, I couldn't stop thinking about her. About that look in her eyes when her card got declined, about how desperate she was to pretend everything was fine, when clearly it wasn't. It should have made me feel triumphant, but instead, it made me spiral. I went home that night, shut the blinds, and just sat in the dark. My apartment felt too small, too silent. The kind of silence that presses against your skull until you can hear your own pulse. I kept replaying the brunch, the phone call, the group text, the way my parents just sat there like statues while Megan announced she was the sole heir, and I started wondering, why wasn't I enough? That's the thing nobody tells you about being the forgotten kid. It's not just anger. It's this bottomless pit of self-doubt that eats at you when you're alone. You start thinking, maybe you deserved it. Maybe you weren't lovable enough. Maybe if you'd just done more, been more, they wouldn't have picked her over you. I remember sitting on the floor with a bottle of whiskey, scrolling through old photos on my phone, birthdays where Megan was front and center, vacations where she had the best spot in every picture, even Christmas mornings where I looked like an afterthought in the corner of the frame. It was like proof. Proof that I'd always been the extra, the spare tire, the one they kept around out of obligation. For weeks, I shut down. I ignored my friends, skipped work, let dishes pile up in the sink until the smell hit me every time I walked into the kitchen. I didn't want to go outside, didn't want to risk running into Megan again, didn't want to hear her voice. I muted the family group chat, stopped answering my parents' calls, stopped being part of their world completely. But silence has a funny way of amplifying things. The more I avoided them, the louder their absence felt. Every night, lying in bed, I'd stare at the ceiling and hear Megan's voice from that phone call. No hard feelings, right? Like she'd stolen my future and thought it was just a quirky sibling rivalry. I hated her. God, I hated her. But more than that, I hated myself for still wanting my parents' approval, for still craving something I was never going to get. Then, one night, I snapped. It was around midnight, and I couldn't sleep. I was pacing my living room, drunk and angry, when I grabbed my phone and scrolled back through old voicemails. There was one from my dad, left weeks earlier, just after the brunch. His voice was casual, almost bored. He said, "Hey, just checking in. Your mom and I want you to know we love you, okay? But don't make this harder than it needs to be. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I played it again, and again, until the words didn't even sound like words anymore. That was their version of love, gaslighting me into silence, pretending it was me making things difficult, instead of them cutting me out like I was nothing. I threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and fell to the floor with a crack. That was the lowest point. The moment I realized I couldn't keep living like this, circling the drain of their approval. If I didn't pull myself out, I was going to drown in it. So I started writing, not letters to them. God, no, letters to myself. Rants, really. Pages and pages of everything I'd wanted to scream at them over the years. Every slight, every insult, every time I was made to feel invisible, I poured it all out. Some nights I wrote until dawn, hands cramped, eyes raw from crying, and slowly something shifted. The anger didn't go away, but it started turning into fuel for something bigger. Because as much as I wanted to disappear, I couldn't ignore what I'd seen in Megan's eyes at that grocery store. The cracks were real. Her perfect life was slipping through her fingers. And I realized, if she was going down, my parents were going with her. I didn't know how or when, but I could feel it. The golden child's pedestal was starting to wobble, and when it finally toppled, I wanted to be standing there, watching. It didn't take long before Megan's perfect little life started unraveling in ways nobody could ignore. At first, it was whispers. Things I overheard through mutual friends, little tidbits that sounded too good to be true. Megan missing work deadlines, Megan snapping at her coworkers, Megan crying in the parking lot outside her office. I wanted to pretend I didn't care, but let's be real, I cared. I cared more than I should have. Every rumor felt like justice, like karma finally clocking in for a shift after years of being late. The first real sign came when her husband officially left. It wasn't a quiet separation either. He packed his bags, moved out, and within a week, people in town were talking. They said he couldn't handle her anymore, that she was too controlling, too obsessed with appearances, too self-centered. One woman swore she heard him yelling through the walls about how everything always had to be Megan's way. When I heard that, I laughed. I shouldn't have, but I laughed until my stomach hurt, because wasn't that the truth? Everything had always been Megan's way. Even in our family, she got the biggest slice, the best seat, the loudest applause, and now someone else finally saw it. But Megan wasn't about to let anyone see her bleed. No, she doubled down. She started posting more than ever on social media, pictures of herself at fancy restaurants, new outfits, fake smiles so wide they looked painful, captions like "living my best life" and "new beginnings are beautiful." It was pathetic, honestly. A woman trying to convince the world and herself that she wasn't falling apart. But the cracks kept showing. One night, I was scrolling through Facebook when a picture popped up. Megan at some charity gala, wearing this ridiculous sequin dress. And I couldn't help but notice her wrist bare. No wedding ring. People noticed in the comments too. "Where's your husband?" someone asked. She ignored it, of course, but the silence said enough. Then came the money problems. I didn't know the details at first, but I noticed things. She started selling furniture out of my parents' house, stuff that had been there since we were kids. The dining table, the old piano, even that china cabinet from our grandmother. She posted listings online like she was running a garage sale. That one stung, because those weren't just objects, they were pieces of our history, and she was tossing them out like junk just to scrape by. My parents defended her, of course. They told people she was downsizing, that she just wanted a fresh start. But people weren't stupid. Everyone could see Megan was struggling. And the more she struggled, the harder she clung to the one thing she still had, control over my parents. She started bringing them everywhere, posting selfies with them at dinner, bragging about how close they were, how supportive they'd been during her transitions, as if plastering them across social media could erase the fact that her marriage had crumbled, her career was slipping, and her finances were in shambles. I watched it all from the sidelines, equal parts horrified and fascinated. It was like a slow-motion car crash. You don't want to look, but you can't tear your eyes away. And I'll admit it, I felt vindicated. Every stumble, every misstep, every public humiliation, it was everything I'd dreamed of since that brunch. But underneath the satisfaction, there was something else, a darker, quieter feeling that scared me. Because as much as I hated Megan, as much as I wanted her to fall, part of me realized something. If she fell hard enough, my parents would come crawling back. And the question was, when that day came, would I let them? It amazed me how far my parents would go to protect Megan's image. Even as her life started collapsing in slow motion, they acted like nothing was wrong. Worse, they acted like she was thriving. When people asked about the divorce, my mom would tilt her head, give that fake polite smile, and say, "Oh, they're just taking time to focus on themselves. It's very healthy, actually." Healthy? Her husband left her because he couldn't stand her anymore. Nothing about it was healthy. My dad was even worse. He started bragging about how Megan was so independent now, how she was taking charge of her life. He didn't mention that her credit cards were maxed out, that she was pawning family heirlooms just to pay bills. No, in his eyes, Megan was still the golden child who could do no wrong. And every time I heard it, every time they spun her disasters into fairy tales, the anger inside me twisted tighter, because it wasn't just denial, it was betrayal. Again. I remember one night I finally picked up when my mom called. I don't even know why I answered. Maybe I wanted to hear her voice. Maybe I wanted to feel like a kid again for 5 minutes. But of course the conversation turned into another Megan monologue. "She's been so strong," my mom said. "We're just so proud of how she's handling everything." I snapped. "Proud? She's selling Grandma's china cabinet on Facebook Marketplace. She's drowning, Mom, and you're pretending she's winning gold medals." There was silence on the line, and for a moment I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd finally hear me. But then she sighed, in that disappointed way that always made me feel 12 years old again. "You're being too harsh. Family sticks together. You wouldn't understand. You've always been so cold." Cold. That word hit like a knife. Cold because I wouldn't kiss Megan's feet? Cold because I didn't buy into the fairy tale? I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. But the rage sat in my chest for days. The truth was, my parents weren't blind. They saw Megan's failures. They knew her marriage was over, her finances were wrecked, her career was hanging by a thread. They saw it all. But they refused to admit it, because admitting it would mean admitting they'd chosen wrong, that they'd built their entire lives around a child who couldn't stand on her own. And if they admitted that, what would it say about how they treated me? So instead, they doubled down. They defended her, coddled her, shielded her. Every stumble was bravery. Every bad decision was her finding herself. They twisted reality so far it made me dizzy. The worst part? They expected me to join in, to play the supporting role in Megan's redemption arc, to clap for her, comfort her, maybe even bail her out when things got really bad. But I couldn't do it. Not anymore. I kept my distance, but I watched. I watched them throw every ounce of their love and energy into saving her. I watched Megan cling to them like a lifeline, even as she spiraled further. I watched the cracks spread wider and wider across their perfect little family portrait, and deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time, because you can patch holes for a while, you can hide the leaks, paint over the damage, pretend the foundation isn't rotting. but eventually, the whole thing comes crashing down, and when it did, they'd have no one left to turn to, except me. It started with the car. Megan had always been obsessed with her shiny black SUV, the one she leased to look professional. She loved that thing like it was a trophy. Every time she picked me up in it years ago, she'd brag about the leather seats, the sound system, the way people turned their heads when she drove by. It was her status symbol, proof she was winning at life. So when I saw it parked in front of a used car lot one morning with a bright orange for sale sticker on the windshield, I almost didn't believe it. I slowed my car, stared, and there it was. Megan's prized possession, sitting there like a wounded animal waiting to be picked apart. I found out later it had been repossessed. She'd fallen behind on the payments. For someone like Megan, that wasn't just a financial blow, it was humiliation. Her whole identity was built on appearances, and now people in town were whispering about how the golden girl couldn't even keep her car. After that, it was like dominoes. Her landlord kicked her out of her condo for unpaid rent. Word spread at her office that she'd been missing work, snapping at her boss, showing up late and leaving early. It didn't take long before she was let go, not fired, according to her, transitioning. But everyone knew, and my parents, they scrambled. They tried to spin it like they always did. She just needs a fresh start, my mom told the neighbors. She's taking some time to focus on herself, my dad said at church. But the tone was different now. They weren't just defending her, they were begging people to believe it. Meanwhile, Megan moved back into their house. Of course she did. She showed up with boxes of clothes, piles of makeup, and a mountain of attitude, as if she was doing them a favor by gracing them with her presence. It was surreal, watching it unfold from a distance. The girl who had everything handed to her was suddenly living like a teenager again, in the same bedroom she grew up in. And instead of facing reality, my parents bent over backward to make her comfortable, cooking her meals, doing her laundry, even lending her money. I couldn't help but laugh when I heard about it. Not out loud, not in front of anyone, but late at night when I was alone. It was bitter, ugly laughter, because all those years they spent telling me Megan was the strong one, the successful one, the chosen one, and here she was, completely dependent on them just to survive. But underneath that laughter was something darker, a question that gnawed at me. What happens when my parents can't carry her anymore? They weren't young. They were already stretched thin, emotionally and financially. Megan wasn't just draining her own future, she was draining theirs too. And I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that eventually they'd look at me, they'd turn to the child they'd cast aside, the one they cut out of the will, and they'd expect me to step in. The thought made my stomach twist, because part of me wanted to slam the door in their faces, to remind them of every moment they chose Megan over me, every time they made me feel like I didn't exist. But another part of me, the part that still craved their approval like oxygen, wanted to wait, wanted to see the day they finally admitted they were wrong. And that day was coming. I could feel it in my bones, because Megan wasn't just slipping, she was free-falling, and sooner or later, even my parents wouldn't be able to deny it. The call came late one night. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, jolting me awake. For a second, I thought it was a wrong number, but when I saw Mom flashing across the screen, my stomach clenched. She never called me this late. I almost didn't answer. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering, debating whether I even wanted to hear whatever excuse or plea she had for me, but curiosity won. I swiped, pressed the phone to my ear, and said nothing. Her voice was shaky. "We need to talk." Those 4 words hit me harder than I expected. Not "how are you?" Not "we miss you." Just business. Just desperation. "What's wrong?" I asked flatly, though deep down I already knew. "It's Megan," she said, her voice cracking. She's not doing well." I almost laughed. Not doing well. That was the understatement of the century, but I stayed silent, letting her squirm. "She's been drinking too much," Mom continued, "spending the little money she has left on things she shouldn't. We're doing everything we can, but," she trailed off, and for the first time in my life, I heard something I'd never heard from her before: defeat. Finally, she dropped the mask. "We can't handle this alone anymore." And there it was, the moment I'd been waiting for, the moment when all their denial, all their favoritism, all their smug dismissal of me came crashing down. They needed me. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to throw every memory of their cruelty back in her face. Part of me wanted to hang up and let her drown in the mess she created. But another part reveled in it. This was justice. This was payback. This was the universe, finally balancing the scales. I let the silence stretch until she said, almost in a whisper, "Please, just come over. Just talk to us." To her, I swallowed hard. "Now you want me involved? After cutting me out of your will? After making it clear I didn't matter?" Her breath caught. She didn't deny it. She didn't defend herself. She just said, "We were wrong." Those 3 words. I'd imagined them my whole life, but hearing them out loud didn't feel like triumph. It felt heavy, like a stone pressing on my chest. I didn't give her an answer that night. I just said, "I'll think about it," and hung up. But I couldn't sleep after that. My mind kept replaying her voice, broken and small, nothing like the woman who had always seemed so sure of herself. They were finally crawling back, and I had a choice to make. I hadn't set foot in my parents' house in years. Just standing on the front porch made my chest feel tight, like all the air had been sucked out of me. The paint was peeling, the garden was overgrown, the porch light flickered like it was on its last breath. This wasn't the pristine, show-off house I remembered. It looked tired, worn down, like the people inside. When my dad opened the door, he looked smaller somehow. His shoulders slumped, his face pale and lined. For a second, I didn't even recognize him. He forced a smile, but it crumbled almost immediately. "Thanks for coming," he said quietly, stepping aside. The smell hit me first. Stale alcohol, burnt food, something sour beneath it all. The house felt heavy, suffocating, like the walls themselves were groaning under the weight of Megan's collapse. And then I saw her. Megan was slouched on the couch in the living room, surrounded by empty wine bottles and fast food wrappers. Her hair was greasy, her clothes wrinkled, and her eyes, those smug, superior eyes that had always looked at me like I was beneath her, were dull and red-rimmed. She barely glanced at me. "Oh look," she muttered, voice dripping with sarcasm, even in her wreckage. "The prodigal sibling returns." I wanted to feel pity. I really did. But the bitterness in her tone, even as her life lay in ruins, set my blood boiling. Mom rushed in from the kitchen, wringing her hands. She looked 10 years older than the last time I'd seen her. "She doesn't mean that," she said quickly. She's not herself right now." "Not herself?" I snapped. "When has she ever been anything but this? You just refuse to see it." The room went silent. Megan smirked bitterly and reached for another half-empty glass, but her hand trembled. For the first time, I saw fear flicker across her face. Dad cleared his throat. "We're asking for your help," he said, his voice low, almost pleading. "We don't know what else to do. She won't listen to us." I stared at them. These were the same parents who had cut me out of their will, who had made me the family ghost, who had chosen Megan over me at every turn, and now here they were, begging for my involvement. Part of me wanted to unleash years of pent-up rage, to tell them no, to walk out and never look back. But another part of me, the part that had always craved their acknowledgement, wanted to stay, to finally hold the upper hand. So I took a step closer, looked Megan dead in the eyes, and said, "If you want me here, things are going to change. Starting now." She laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "You think you're the savior now? Please. You've always been jealous." I leaned down, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "Jealous? No. And now, for once in your life, you're the one who needs me." Her smirk faltered. The room crackled with tension, my parents frozen between us. This wasn't just a family meeting anymore, it was a reckoning, and I wasn't about to waste it. The silence after my words felt like a thunderclap. My parents stared at me like I'd just grown into someone they didn't recognize. Maybe I had. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the forgotten child, the afterthought. I was the one setting the terms. Megan sneered, trying to summon that old superiority, but her voice cracked. "You think you've won something? Don't flatter yourself. I'll bounce back. I always do." I didn't flinch. "No, Megan, you've coasted. You've been carried. But now there's no one left to catch you." Her hand tightened around the wine glass, knuckles white. For a moment, I thought she'd throw it, but instead she slammed it on the table, shards splintering everywhere. My mom gasped. My dad lurched forward, but I stayed rooted. "Enough," I said firmly, my voice steady. "This ends now. I'm not here to save you, Megan. I'm here because they." I gestured at my parents, who were pale and trembling, finally admitted what they've done. They cut me out, erased me, chose you over me, and look where it got them. My mom's lips trembled. Tears welled in her eyes. We were wrong, she whispered again, but this time it wasn't just desperation, it was confession. Her voice cracked. We thought we were protecting her. We thought you didn't need us. I laughed, sharp and bitter. Didn't need you? No, I just learned not to expect you. There's a difference. My dad finally spoke, voice breaking. We failed you. He looked at me like he wanted forgiveness, like the weight of decades had finally crushed him, but I didn't let them off that easy. You failed me, yes, but more than that, you failed yourselves. You poured everything into her, and she used it all up, and now you're empty. You wanted a perfect daughter. Instead, you raised someone who doesn't know how to stand. Megan shot up from the couch, eyes blazing with tears. Shut up. You don't know what it's like being me. I stepped closer, staring her down. You're right, I don't, because I was too busy surviving while you were busy being adored. She froze, chest heaving, but no words came out. For the first time in her life, she didn't have a comeback. The room was thick with everything unsaid. My parents looked broken. Megan looked small, and I felt something I'd never felt before in that house. Power. I turned to my parents. I'll help, but on my terms, not hers, not yours, mine. They nodded quickly, too quickly, desperate to cling to the lifeline I was offering. As I walked toward the door, Megan called after me, voice weak, cracking at the edges. You'll regret this. You think they love you now? They'll always come back to me. I stopped, hand on the doorknob, and looked back one last time. No, Megan, this time, they're crawling back to me, and whether you like it or not, I'm not the forgotten one anymore. I left them there, my parents crumpled in shame, Megan trapped in the wreckage of her own arrogance. For once, I wasn't the outsider. I was the one in control. And as I stepped out into the cool night air, I realized something. Revenge didn't come from punishing them, it came from making them finally see me, and now, they could never unsee me again.